All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today, we are going to be continuing looking at the kind of modified, newer versions of the races in Monsters of the Multiverse. Quick reminder, if you do enjoy this series, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those things are super important to more people getting to see this. So, yeah. Not a whole lot stuff to go over. Let's dive into it. So, quick reminder, Monsters of the Multiverse collected a bunch of races from a bunch of different sources, and quite a few of them made some modifications to just make them more useful, to be perfectly honest, and that's why we're doing this. I had a whole series where I talked about the of various races and how you could use them in a lot of situations because most people don't. And so this just felt like a natural thing to do. So the first race we're going to cover today is the Bugbear. Bugbears have been kind of a standard enemy since the iteration iterations of D&D. If you're unaware of what a bugbear is, they're actually a goblinoid. So in the same family as goblins and hobgoblins and the things like that. A bugbear is just bigger than all of those, effectively. You have goblins, which are relatively small. Hobgoblins, which are a little bit more kind of medium-sized, more like human-sized goblinoids, and then you have bugbears, which are all big and they're beefy and they're furry and they're kind of freaky looking. Playing as a bugbear or monstrous race is not something that's been super common in the D&D 4th edition. Played around with it a little bit. I think you could be a bugbear in 4th edition, but the monstrous races and things like that just really were generally just bad guys. So when the bugbear was introduced originally in Volo's Guide to Monsters, that was one of the cool things about Volo's Guide is it gave you all of this, like, where it introduced the bugbear race. It also had an entire section about kind of goblinoid society in general. It was really interesting. As I mentioned before, Monsters of the Multiverse doesn't have any of that. It for the bugbear, it's got 2 paragraphs talking about, yeah, this is a bugbear. No real lore to it other than, hey, these are the very basics of how it works. But interesting thing, not a ton has changed with the bugbear from when it was printed in Volos to the Monsters of the Multiverse version of it. Yeah, let's dive into the bugbear. Creature type, you are humanoid. You are also considered a goblinoid for any prerequisites or effects that requires you to be a goblinoid. So, humanoid is humanoid effectively is a shape more than anything else. Goblinoid specifically is a creature type, and yeah, humanoid is a creature type as well. But a lot of quote unquote humanoid things just kind of means it doesn't. It's either a human or it has the same basic configuration as a human, like, generally 1 head, 2 arms, 2 legs. Generally. Size is medium. Walking speed is 30 feet, and you've got dark vision. Now, they do mention in the little kind of write-up that they have in here, there is some Fey ancestry to the bugbear. So it has the Fey ancestry, which is advantage on saving throws made to avoid or end the charm condition on yourself. So it's hard to charm them. And then this is kind of the big thing for the bugbear is long-limbed. When you make a melee attack on your turn, your reach for it is 5 feet greater than normal. So this has a lot of things that it affects. The first thing that most people think of is like, oh, cool. That means effectively the Bugbear has reach with every weapon, and any weapon that has the reach feature, it means a Bugbear. To try that again, a Bugbear can actually hit a creature with a reach weapon from up to 15 feet away, which is a huge, huge area of control. Now, something that a lot of people don't think about is opportunity attacks. Again, the most common reaction that you will see in D&D 5th edition is the opportunity attack. It's not to say that it's the most useful thing, but everybody knows about opportunity attacks. Every class can do an opportunity attack. Everybody can do it. The interesting thing about 5th edition opportunity attacks compared to any other edition is you only get an opportunity attack if they leave your reach with a melee weapon, which means for a Bugbear, a creature has a significantly larger area that they can move around in without getting an opportunity attack from a Bugbear, especially if you're using a reach weapon. It effectively means if you have a reach weapon like a polearm, a glaive or something like that, that means a creature can move up to 15 feet away from you and not provoke an opportunity attack. Now, that also means if you combine this long-limbed feature with something like Polearm Master or Sentry, where you now can make opportunity attacks when they enter your range instead of just leaving it, well, that turned into something significantly different, because now you can kind of position yourself to be a place where you can stop someone from going where you don't want them to go with that combination of Polar Master and Sentry. The one thing that you have to kind of focus on is opportunity attacks take your reaction. You only get one of those per round. So if you've got like 3 dudes coming at you, you're only going to be able to stop one of them. The other 2 are going to get through. So make sure whomever you are using your reaction on, if that is what you decided you want to do, whomever you use your reaction on is the one that you want to make sure is not getting through. So understanding which are the worst baddies, the ones that you want to stop from getting close, is an essential thing to know. Now, as we look through a couple of the other things, you'll start noticing that as much as this feels like a very strength-based class, Bugbears are surprisingly nimble. Which seems weird because the next thing I get is called Powerful Build. There's quite a few different races that have this Powerful Build thing. Basically, you count as one size larger, determining your carrying capacity and the weight you can push, drag, or lift. It is so rare that any DM in 5th edition actually uses carrying capacity, just because it's just numbers and it's really boring. And 99 out of 100 times, even if you do track it, you're never going to reach your carrying capacity. The weight you can push, drag, or lift, that is a significantly different thing. And that I have seen quite a few different DMs actually did deal with. So that would be useful. However, the very next thing is really the only thing that changes compared to the Volo's version of this, and that is the sneaky thing. You're provisioning the stealth skill, which is kind of interesting, and that's all it used to be. Now they also add, in addition, without squeezing, you can move through and stop in a space large enough for a small creature. Normally, if you're a medium-sized creature, if you move through a space that is only large enough for a small creature, you have to do what's called squeezing, which you have disadvantage on a bunch of things. You move at half your speed. Squeezing is rough. The Bugbear doesn't squeeze when going into small spaces and can stay in spaces where they squeeze. Generally, if you're squeezing through a space, you generally can't stay there for long periods of time because you're squeezing. You're not fitting in a space that you want to fit in. I don't know if there's actual rules about how long you can stop in a space you are squeezing through. I should probably look that up. But I would assume, since they mentioned the stop in here, that there is something. So that, stealth is a dexterity based skill. So, and that's the other big thing about Monsters of the Multiverse in general is they've kind of thrown out race-based ability score improvements. And that isn't technically a new thing. Tasha's effectively got rid of that with there's an optional rule that you can just choose your own ability scores, and that works on every single race. So any new race is just going to do that. They did that in Van Richten's. All the lineages in Van Richten's were had that same thing where you basically get to choose the one that you want. So this, despite the fact that powerful build and just the look of a bugbear, you would think there'd be strength, but sneaky does give you kind of a hint that maybe you should be going a little more stealth based. And then the next thing kind of cements that. The last thing that bugbears get is called surprise attack. If you hit a creature with an attack roll, the creature takes an extra 2d6 damage if it hasn't taken a turn yet in the current combat. Now, assassination rogues have another thing that kind of does something similar. It doesn't give them just a flat extra damage. I believe it either gives them an auto crit or gives them some benefit to attacking a creature that hasn't acted yet in combat. The reason I mention that as something that is dexterity based is your initiative itself is dexterity based. So having a high initiative means you're going to get a significantly better chance to use surprise attack. And it specifically says if you hit a creature with an attack roll, the creature takes an extra 2d6 damage if it hasn't taken a turn yet in the current combat. It does not say once per turn. It does not say anything remotely similar to that. So combining surprise attack with a high initiative and multiple attacks with a decent movement, like walking speed for this is 30 feet. It's not great. But if you were to take the mobile feat or have anything that increases your ability to move, whether that's someone casts Longstrider on you, whether that's you are a monk, anything like that, I would probably move away from Barbarian. They are hypermobile, but they are very, very strength focused, and that would cause issues with this. But any thing like that means that you can actually, to get the most benefit out of surprise attack, is move around and attack multiple creatures, because each one you're going to get that extra 2d6 damage. So especially if you're doing something like a monk. Again, monks are not designed to be damage dealers, but a bugbear monk would get a lot of use out of going in, punching 4 different people, maybe doing a Drunken Master monk, because Drunken Master eventually gets the ability to make a ton of attacks. I think up to an additional 5. So if you combine that with a surprise attack, you've just turned into a very, very useful damaging character. Now again, that is only on the first round of combat. So other things like getting a weapon of warning, other things like that are going to be super, super beneficial to this. But when you combine proficiency in this stealth skill, your long limbs, your surprise attack, I am slightly obsessed with the whip in 5th edition because nobody uses it. It is such an undervalued item, and I love it. So if you were to go with a whip-wielding bugbear, maybe even a dual whip-wielding bugbear, because I just think that's cool, you'd have a reach of up to 15 feet. Which, again, would make it significantly easier to be able to take advantage of that surprise attack, because you wouldn't have to get as close to enemies. It's a dexterity-based weapon. You're getting an extra 2d6 on each one. So a fighter, maybe a Battlemaster fighter that can add some extra stuff on there, If you go rogue, that would give you at least two different things. Only one of them would get your sneak attack, but you would still get some extra benefit. And again, because it's an extra 2d6 to damage, it means if you crit, you double that. So there's a lot of different things the Bugbear that a lot of people wouldn't really think about for the Bugbear, because again, when you think of the Bugbear, it's this big, things uses like pole axes and stuff like that. You think of a strength-based creature, but you can very easily turn this into a dexterity powerhouse and then just give a couple of feats to it to turn it into something amazing. So, yeah, that's the Bugbear. Moving on, hoping to cover more than two this time. Next one up is the Centaur. The Centaur is one of the most recent additions to D&D. I don't think they had a Centaur race in earlier editions, or at least I myself am not personally familiar with it. The Centaur itself actually showed up in the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, which, if you're not familiar with, is a campaign setting that is actually from Magic the Gathering, the card game. If you're unaware, Magic the Gathering is what keeps game stores open. It is by far the most profitable thing Wizard of the Coast has ever touched. Even with how popular D&D 5th edition is, it pales in comparison to Magic. So they eventually started bringing some of the immense amount of lore that is built into Magic the Gathering. They eventually went, you know what, let's put it somewhere else. And so they started bringing Magic the Gathering stuff to Dungeons & Dragons. They've done actually two different campaign settings. They had Theros, which is kind of an ancient Greek themed setting, and then you had Ravnica, and Ravnica is kind of a magic based. Ravnica is a weird thing. It's one of the older realms. I can't remember what they call them in Magic. They have names for the different worlds, and I can't remember what they're called. I believe Ravnica is where the guilds are from, which is where you actually get the names for multicolored decks. I don't know if people use the names as much anymore. It used to be really popular. Like if you're running a red-white deck, it was called a Boros deck because there's a guild on Ravnica called Boros, and they are a combination of red mana and white mana using groups, and I happen to be a big fan of the Boros deck. All the two color combinations have an associated guild in Ravnica. So anyway, Centaurs in Ravnica, Centaurs are, if I remember correctly, I believe Centaurs are a green mana. They're associated with green mana. I don't know what guild they're associated with because I'm not huge into Magic the Gathering. I just know enough to get in trouble. And so that's where they showed up. They are kind of interesting as far as a D&D race. First of all, creature type, you're Fey, so you're not humanoid, you're Fey, which means different things affect you differently. Size is still medium, but your walking speed is 40 feet instead of 30. And this is the first thing that is kind of interesting about the Centaur and what can turn into something kind of really, really interesting. They have this feature called Charge. If you move at least 30 feet 30 feet straight towards a target and then hit it with a melee weapon attack on the same turn, you can immediately follow that attack with a bonus action, making one attack against the target with your hooves. Now, Charge is actually something that a lot of monsters have. They name it different things. I think tigers have the Pounce ability, which is effectively the same thing, only a slightly shorter distance. I think they only have to move 20 feet. But what that means for the Centaur is being the more mobile you are and the larger an area you can move around in, the more damage you can do. And that especially tends to be useful for things like Battle Master fighters, where anytime they make an attack, they can add on a maneuver to it and can turn into some really, really powerful things. The other thing that's interesting, we're going to go kind of out of order, is they mention your hooves. Well, they define what your hooves are. When you hit with them, the strike deals a d6 plus strength modifier bludgeoning damage instead of the normal damage you would do for an unarmed strike. So your hooves are what your unarmed strikes are. Normally, an unarmed strike, if you hit with one, is 1 plus your strength modifier damage. That's what it is for everyone. There are feats that can change that, and if you're a monk, it changes. But everyone else, that's how unarmed strikes will work, and this gives you a different way to do it. And a d6 is decent. In Volos, it was a d4, and it was... Again, we're only talking about an average damage difference of about 1, but a d4 just doesn't feel as good as a d6 ever. So, effectively, this allows you to kind of dual wield with a great weapon. And what I mean by that, if you are dual wielding, unless you have the dual wielder feat, the largest damage die you will ever have for your main or offhand is a d6. Light weapons cap out at a d6. So, with this, you basically charge to a target, make a regular attack, and then you can make this unarmed strike as your bonus action and do the same damage you would normally do if you were dual wielding, but you don't have to. You can have a big weapon. So combining this with Great Weapon Fighter can be really, really useful because you get that extra damage. The other thing that can be very, very useful, especially if you get extra attack, is the mobile feat. First of all, it gives you additional speed, which is nice, but you do need the ability to move around. And so if you don't want to be taking a bunch of opportunity attacks, the mobile feat, if you attack something, whether you hit or miss, it cannot make an opportunity attack at you. So what you can do with this is if you have extra attack, you make an attack. Okay, now they can attack you. You run, and you run back. The issue with that is you wouldn't quite have enough speed to do bubba. But if you can find someone that's at least 30 feet away, or you can find a way to get 30 feet away from them, like if you have two people here and you run this way and then boom, like that, you can find ways to make the mobile feat work pretty well for you. Anything that gives you increases to your movement speed is going to make that charge even more useful. So lots of different things that can really benefit from that. The other way you can do this, the Hunter Ranger actually has, I believe it's a 6th or 7th level ability they can choose that gives disadvantage on opportunity attacks against them. Any opportunity attacks against them have disadvantage. So that could be the other way you could get around the charge and being able to get the most out of that. And hunters are really, really good at getting additional damage every time they hit something. Because every time they hit, as long as something is hunter's marked, every time they hit, they get extra damage. So really making sure that you are able to kind of take advantage of your hunter's mark to target is going to be beneficial with that. Something like a Hexblade Warlock could also get a lot of use out of that, or anyone that gets the Hex spell can get the same benefit out of that. You could even go a Centaur Paladin, and if you go Vengeance Paladin, they get access to the Hunter's Mark spell. So there's a lot of different ways, and Paladins in general, anytime Paladins get additional attacks, that also means additional chances to smite. So a Paladin Centaur can be really, really, really powerful. The next thing they have is kind of weird. It's called Equine Build. It's very similar to what the Bugbear had, where you count as one size larger when determining carrying capacity and the weight you can push or drag. However, it has an additional addendum. Any climb that requires hands and feet is especially difficult for you because of your equine legs. When you make such a climb, each foot of movement costs you 4 extra feet instead of the normal 1 extra foot. So normally, to climb a 10-foot wall, you would need to spend 20 feet of movement, 1 extra foot. For this one, it takes 4 extra feet. So instead of a 10-foot wall taking you 20 feet of movement, a 10-foot wall would take you 50 feet of movement to climb. So that is kind of interesting. Again, climbing is not something that a ton of people use in 5th edition, just because there's a lot of ways to get around having to use the climbing rules. What I mean by that is monks can run on walls. There's lots of different ways to teleport, to have so you can avoid climbing. So that, as much as yes, that is a huge limitation to the class, there are a lot of ways to get around having to climb something. So it's not quite as bad as it sounds. Then the last thing I get is natural affinity. You have proficiency in one of the following skills of your choice: animal handling, medicine, nature, or survival. So overall, the centaur is kind of interesting, and that charge feature is going to be the big thing that, whether you're level 1 or level 20, there are ways to get a lot out of that. Anything that gives you some kind of extra effect on a hit is going to be beneficial to them, whether that's battle master maneuvers, paladin smites, hunter's mark damage, or hex damage. There's a lot of ways that you can get the most benefit out of that without doing too much work. Like, this is not something that is super complicated to put into a build. So let's do one more before we get going. Next one up is the Changeling. Changelings are something that actually originated with Eberron. They first showed up in Eberron Rising from the Last War. And for the most part, I don't think anything has changed other than maybe a little bit of wording. And obviously, the ability score increases. The Changeling itself is an interesting creature. Creature type, you're Fey. Your size is medium or small. You choose a size and you select the race. And your walking speed is 30 feet. You get Changeling Instincts, which I think is... Yeah, it's the same. They put it in a different order in that, but basically you gain proficiency with 2 of the following skills: deception, insight, intimidation, performance, or persuasion. So effectively a bunch of charisma stuff and insight. And then shape changer. Shape changer is the big thing for changelings. Effectively, you you change your shape. You can make yourself look like a member of another race. You can effectively duplicate anything that you've seen. You cannot duplicate the appearance of someone you've never seen. And you have to adopt a form that has the same basic arrangements of limbs that you have. So effectively, a changeling could not transform into a centaur because they have extra limbs, or a thri-kreen, because again, they also have extra limbs, and we don't. That's not going to work. But everything else, they are masters of disguise, and that can turn into a bunch of really interesting things. In combat, a lot of times it's not going to be as useful because you can change your physical appearance. You can't change your clothing, though. So unless you are already wearing the bad guy's uniform, it's probably not going to be something you can do in combat. However, if you set it up correctly, it could be a really fun, I don't know which one to shoot situation that you just keep going through over and over again. Because again, you can change in anything you want. However, outside of combat is going to be the one where you get the most use out of this. And again, there are tons and tons of uses of the ability to not just be able to imitate someone else, but to be able to replicate the mystique style, like perfectly. That's what the shape changer does. And there can be in combat benefits for that. Like I said, doing it in the middle of combat, probably not. But if you're going to get into combat, coming in looking like someone completely different, like coming in and looking like a small child that, got lost in the woods, they will react to you very differently than if you come in looking like an adventure, you know, with daggers drawn and everything like that. So really the limitations of shape changer are your imagination. How crazy do you want to get with this? And knowledge is power. Again, you can't duplicate the appearance of an individual you've never seen, but if you can get close enough to a camp to see a couple of the faces in there, you can very easily infiltrate a group by literally just impersonating someone that's there. And because it takes an action, effectively it takes 6 seconds to change, being able to kind of hop between disguises when the person that you're imitating has shown up is not difficult for you. So you got to be on top of things. You have to be very, very aware of what's going on. But yeah, lots and lots of fun things you can do as a changeling. So anyway, final thoughts for this. Overall, like I said, the big things that I tend to focus on is Bugbears. Dexterity is remarkably more useful than you would think, especially if you want to get all the surprise attacks you can. For the Centaur, go to town with that extra attack. Picking a class that gets benefits to making additional attacks is always a good idea. You know, a Centaur Barbarian could get some crazy stuff. And then with the Changeling, you're the master of the disguise. Go nuts. You know, be as creative and sneaky and everything as you want to. Otherwise, that is going to be all for me today. As always, again, remember to like, subscribe, turn notifications on in the comments down below. What do you think the most interesting Bugbear build would be? Something now that you've seen what it is, what do you think would be just the most out there, interesting aspect of a Bugbear? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that is all for me today. And I'll see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.